Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your weekly look at what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer. So this episode is brought to you by Untappd and the Untappd store. Use the coupon code PODCAST to get 20% off your next purchase. That's the coupon code PODCAST at the Untappd store.
Hi everyone, I'm John, and I love episodes where we get to have a guest on the show. We began our Beer 101 series on June 17th. It was episode 13 in our third season with a feature about hops. And since then, we've covered all four vital ingredients in beer, how to actually turn them into a beer and what to do with it afterwards. And on this episode 27, we're bringing Ryan Wheaton from the Brews podcast on to talk about how marketing plays a role in the beers we drink. But first, let's open up a quick pint. Harrison, what do we got?
All right. I'm very excited, as we always are with every beer we drink. We can't intro beers any other way here, but it's true. I'm pumped. We're drinking from Lord Hobo Doom Sauce. So you heard that right. If you're more familiar with their, I guess, more widely distributed beer, Boom Sauce, this is the Black Ipa version of that beer, double IPA, Doom Sauce. It's got an awesome label with like a hop Grim Reaper, a hop Reaper, whatever you want to call it. But quick specs on it. So again, from Lord Hobo Brewing, a double black IPA, clocks in at 7.8% ABV. And from the breweries, quick notes on it. So kind of gives a little backstory here of Doom Sauce. So welcome, darkness has fallen upon our flagship double IPA, pouring black as midnight with a hefty tan head, yet conjuring the aromas of fresh citrus layered with the soft tropical fruit and candied orange flavors you know and love in Boom Sauce. There appears to be something sinister at work. By summoning the smoothest black malts available to mortal men, we've created a delicate roasted malt backbone with a slightly sweet and remarkable clean finish. From the depths of the darkness, the Doom Sauce emerges. So, setting a tone.
That's awesome.
Thank
you for addressing that. I was like, wait, these are the Boom Sauce guys.
Right. And yeah, now tonight we'll know them as the Doom Sauce guys. I feel like a church bell should have been ringing slowly in the background as I read that as we pour this, like the beginning of Hell's Bells from AC/DC. But John, have you had your first sip?
Yeah, I took a sip already.
Yeah, snuck one in. I thought I saw that. Looks delicious. Looks beautiful.
Yeah. This is different than Boom Sauce because it's black. But outside of that, okay, so I'm having a hard time getting confused, I should say, by the aroma and the taste. I get a lot of like rich roasted in the nose of this beer, but if I can block that out, I swear to God, this almost just tastes like a really clean, crisp IPA.
Yeah,
and it may just be me. Harrison, help me out. What are you getting on your first sip?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, in my experience, black IPAs can kind of dance walk down two different roads. We'll get to that in a minute. But this one I'm tasting kind of like a bitter coffee.
Yep.
Bitter coffee. And I mean that that's not a knock. That's just kind of like knowing it's a beer. The bitterness, for me, I think it's coming from the hops more than anything. And the nose, there's like a fresh grassy, you get a little bit of like a candied orange in there. But that
Halloween-y.
A little bit. Yeah, maybe, right. Maybe it's like a chocolatey kind of candy thing, something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's sure. Yeah, but like first sip, it's like a lighter kind of coffee that crawls into that, like, it's an earthy, I guess would say, like bitterness to it. So maybe like some of the citrus tones are just doing something different with this malt backbone where it's not like a punch of orange in the face. It's more like your those roasted malts, while pretty smooth, are blending into that like hop bitterness in a pretty interesting way.
Yeah, I think the battle that's happening here, if I can make it up, is I'm getting this rich coffee roasted, almost chocolatey from the malt, but bitter, right? Not like milk chocolate, but the good stuff that most of us don't want to spend the money on unless it's someone's birthday. That type of chocolate. And then you're mixing it with, I don't know what hops are in this beer, but my mouth is telling me that there's some kind of like citrus flavor that's coming from the hop. Sure. And those two things are kind of battling in this Doom sauce.
Yeah. I mean, second sips, I get like, it's interesting. It's almost like there's a grapefruit running around in there somewhere. Like I drink it and it's like roasty grapefruit, malty. And then it does. It like jumps up quickly, both in flavor and bitterness, which is, again, it's fun. And in keeping with the new tradition of the, I guess it's not that new anymore, but kind of current tradition, then I guess I could say with the podcast, we are going to highlight what the BJCP has to say about this style of beer. And so, if you don't know yet, this is technically, Black IPAs are the 21B specialty IPA, Black IPA category as the BJCP sees it. And quickly, overall impressions on this guy, they say a beer with the dryness, hop-forward balance, and flavor characteristics of an American IPA, only darker in color, but without strongly roasted or burnt flavors. The flavor of darker malts is gentle and supportive, not a major flavor component. And drinkability is key. And kind of they go through the appearance and aroma and flavor of this, which is, kind of can be dancing between, like chocolate and grapefruit and coffee and orange and stone fruit. And obviously the hops you use at that point can open you up to all kinds of flavors here. But one of the, as I mentioned earlier, I've had Black IPAs kind of go down two different roads. Some of them I've had where if I had my eyes closed and drink it, I would just think it was like the hoppiest IPA ever. Like Nighttime from Lagunitas is a beer like that, where it's like I wouldn't know it's a Black IPA if I wasn't looking at it. It's so bitter. It's light. The dark malts almost. It's like I'm not sure what they're even doing to the profile of that beer. It's really all about the hops, as most of their beers are. Maybe adds a bit to the mouthfeel. And then there are other ones that are kind of like almost like a hop forward porter. And those are cool too.
Yeah, like Founder's Dark Penance.
There you go. Okay, yes, that's a great example. You're right. Right, that's a big beer too. Isn't it like 9% or something, if not more? It's like a bigger. I loved that beer when that thing came out. And then Founders also made like a black rye IPA that I loved. That was the other way of doing that, where that was like a really hop forward beer that blasted you with hops. So it's a lot of these styles. They're if you don't know already, it's kind of obvious though. There's a broadness to them. In fact, the first allowing for experimental, things, which oftentimes creates some of the best beers out there. An example of this would be the first time I had Stone's Sublimely Self-Righteous, which a lot of people know now is like a pioneer of black IPAs. When that beer first came out, though, it was listed on Beer Advocate and Untappd as an American strong ale, I believe, which is like basically saying that's like anything. That's like can be an IPA, it can be an imperial porter, it can be like an American strong ale. Right, it's huge. So, but I remember, and always will, the first night I had it, it was at TJ's Drinkery in Paoli, PA, which always makes like the top 100 best beer bars in the world, as it should. It's great. It was the day before their like 4th or 5th anniversary party, which is always like a ridiculous bonanza of barrel-aged nonsense. But went in the night before, and the bartender was like, who I knew well, was like, come over here, you gotta try this thing, it's crazy. And I was like, what is it? What's gonna blow my mind? I don't know. I know everything about beer, like a dumb, ignorant person, a young 20-something beer crusader. And he poured it, and I was like, what is this? Is stout? And I drank it, and I was like, what's happening? And immediately, it's like seeing sliced bread for the first time or something. You're like, what? This can be done. Of course it can be done. And then your life changes. So I've always loved this style, long story short, but love to hear from you guys out there. If you have like a first black IPA experience or something like that, where you like had a beer style the first time and it was crazy, share it with us. Go into the Facebook group, tweet us at That Beer Podcast, however you like. But that's mine. I love this style, and I saw the art, the style, and I was like, we got to do this, John. So pump we did.
Dude, definitely. Speaking about the art, I mean, the label,
Yes.
I want to buy this t-shirt. It's got like the hopped Grim Reaper on the can label. This beautiful gold comes through for Doom Sauce. I mean, it's heavy metal and beer. And what better segue, talking about label art, to bring in the next segment to this episode. We've got Ryan queued up for an interview. We're going to talk about marketing. It's what he does.
Yeah.
And this is the final episode of our Beer 101. So we're bringing Ryan in to really talk about kind of how the label takes that beer off the grocery shelf and into your fridge at home. All right, so we're really excited to have Ryan joining us, literally as close as we can get joining us on this episode. Ryan's a podcaster, but he's also really creative. And without further ado, Ryan, would you mind just kind of taking a second and introducing everyone to yourself?
Absolutely. What's up, guys? Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was great fun having you on my podcast. For those of you out there, it's called Branding Brews. The podcast has been around for 3.5 years or so now. Have over 50 episodes that are all like deep dive interviews with other industry professionals and myself, just discussing everything that goes into marketing, branding, and design for a brewery, for beer. It covers everything. So I've been doing that for a while. But my main background really is in graphic design and branding, and I've been doing that for 20 years. And then, in the last, within like the last 7 to 8 years, I really kind of put my focus into just the craft beer industry because it's something I was just passionate about already. And I felt like my talents and my style in design really lent well. And at the time, craft beer packaging kind of sucked. It was all very clip art looking, like lots of rivers and dogs and hops.
That's it.
And so and there was hardly anyone that was from the design world that was putting themselves out into the beer space. And so at the time it was unique. Now it's a much more competitive area in regards to the. It's hard to find a designer now that has not done something for a brewery almost. Right. But it's a whole lot of fun. I've been having a lot of fun doing the podcast and the beer community is great. It's been great to be a part of that. And so, I appreciate you all having me on here to talk more with the Untappd folks and audience out there. I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, I think I love your backstory, and summing it up, right, is kind of you saw a need, you had a talent, and that's kind of what, if I can romanticize, that's what kind of created. You've got a business in doing design work for craft beer and a podcast as well, which as you mentioned, Harrison and I were kind of fortunate enough. That was our first introduction on branding brews on your podcast. The first question I want to ask for our listeners is, I mean, you kind of alluded to it in your introduction, but I think it's important. So, like, what was that first kind of nudge that took you to say, like, all right, I'm creative. Beer right now is a clip art. Is a bunch of clip arts turned to labels on the shelf. What led you to kind of what led you to kind of take that leap and say, I think there's a business here?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great question. I mean, as I had mentioned, so my style, I had when I graduated college, I really I was an avid snowboarder. And I grew up riding skateboards and like that was my kind of my style. When I graduated college, I really wanted to get into that industry. But that was that at the time was it, I'm sure still is, super competitive industry. You have to be like a killer, like illustrator artist to land any sort of, work in that realm. And I started when I went back to college, I started working for a weekly publication that was like art and like art, music, and style, kind of a weekly publication. And I was designing like the covers of the publication weekly, and those kind of things. And that was a whole lot of fun. That was more of my aesthetic and style. And there's something that I really like about doing print design, where or like logo design, where you design something and then you get to see it printed and you get to see it out in the wild. I got to a point where I was a creative director for a marketing agency in Chico, California. And I was a creative director at that agency. I was with them for 10 years. And it got to a point where I started evolving into a role that was doing a lot of like application design, like UI and UX and app design, which some you guys are probably familiar with. I was doing mobile apps and stuff like that. So I know right in the world of you guys and Untappd. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys, it's cool, like, because you're melding the world of that kind of user design and experience, but also with beer. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But for me, like, I started going down that path, and it was just like, wasn't really feeling it so much. I wasn't really enjoying designing websites and user experience as much as I did. I really liked to just make something that looked really cool and just like see it printed on a poster and see it like up at the wall, like somewhere. Because it was done, it's like it's printed, right. It looked cool and it was done. And I can walk away from it and be like, that was awesome. But with a website, it's like, it's ever evolving. It's not done. It's like all of a sudden you can always make the user experience better, and so at that point I was just like, I'm not totally stoked with where I'm going. And I love beer. I've loved beer since I was not quite old enough to drink it. But right, I mean, I think that's a lot of people's story goes that way. And I was just like, man, I should just focus on trying to work with breweries. Their labels are not great. There were some coming out that were better than they had been, and so I think I saw this emergence of good design and good labels and good branding, and I was like, well, man, I want to get into this and kind of ride that wave and try to help a lot of breweries get better with their branding.
I love that, right? Again, kind of seeing this could be better. I mean, even still, all the beers that we're drinking, when you're looking at the label and you're taking a picture of it for your check-in photo, I think there's that person that's looking at that label and thinking, like I could do this better. It's not me, but yeah. But I love that kind of intro story, the origin story.
There you go.
Harrison, you've been quiet for longer than you normally are.
Just sitting like a sponge waiting to pounce or fall or whatever sponges do. I guess they keep sponging.
Yeah, ready to plop.
Growing, right, sporing. Anyway, depends what kind of sponge you're talking about, I guess. So that's awesome. The kind of talking about music and skateboarding, and I've many times heard the comparison from designer friends of mine, kind of talking about like how like what record labels used to be in like the 70s is kind of what like can labels or beer labels are now. There's like this desire to do it, and it's very cool. But like you said, 10 plus years ago, whatever, it was very much like lots of rivers and mountains and kind of definitely not what it is today, where I've seen beer cans that are like works of art, no question. And I bought the prints of that, can as a poster because it truly was, just it made an impact on me. So I guess the kind of the question though I had, and we can talk about that for sure, but the question I had kind of bridging off of that was, I played guitar for like 23 years, and I think I have my own style, but I always like to look towards like other greats like Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr. or Alex Lifeson from Rush. Those are two guys that I like from kind of different worlds for guidance and inspiration. Are there like, I guess, artists or even like breweries now that you follow or you think like, wow, they're doing a really cool job, ones you've worked with, or maybe ones like you've watched from afar and kind of been like, that's really interesting, I wonder what they're gonna do next, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you're asking if there's any that I'm following that I'm kind of maybe inspirational or that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or just do a killer job, and you're like, well, this every time you see it, you're like, whoa, all right, that's cool.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great question. I think like, yeah, I mean, there's ones. That's a great question. I think there's some that are kind of iconic that
Right.
stand out for different reasons. I recently did an interview with Austin Beer Works.
Yeah, I saw
and
that.
I think,
right.
yeah, I think they're pretty iconic in that, like, you can recognize that A on the front of their cans, from 10, 20 feet away, which I think is really, really important on the shelf. I feel like there's so many breweries now that, not so many, but a good amount of breweries that do a good job of having, I mean, I'm a beer nerd. I love the kind of like premium, like barrel aged, bottled, like wild mixed fermentation stuff. So
Right.
yeah. So I feel there's a good amount of breweries that are doing a really cool job at getting really funky, artistic labels on these small batch bottles. So that drives, I think, a lot of the kind of passion and love behind that. And I think there's so many. Unfortunately, I'm not recalling anybody specific in that regards. But
no, but there are tons.
Yeah. But I'm definitely inspired by so many of them. Yeah, and I grew up playing guitar too, so I feel like we have a little bit of a shared background there.
That's right. Yeah. I know. Yeah, that's awesome. And I see so many kind of parallels in the craft beer world, whether it's like music or even like kind of certain countercultures, whether it's like, I don't know, skateboarding or whatever. But do you see, when it comes to like marketing and approaches to brands and getting the word out and doing that creatively, like other industries that like maybe are borrowing from craft beer, or that like you can see like, whoa, skateboarding did this first, and now craft beer is kind of emulating a similar approach, whether it's for like sneakers. You get a lot of comparison to like limited beer releases or like limited sneaker releases, and there's a line out the door and there's a hype and all this stuff. Are you kind of like, I don't know, putting your, like, keeping a pulse on that kind of stuff, or just in kind of common observations, seeing other industries that maybe you have drawn parallels from or inspiration from, or just kind of been like, oh, that's interesting. I see that idea of FOMO or whatever kind of works across people, whether it's beer or like a rare donut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's a great question, I think. And I think that's something that I'm always wanting to look to find those kind of parallels and to look at other industries. The beer shelves are crazy. I think the closest thing you can compare it to would be almost like a wine shelf in a market, where you literally have hundreds of labels on like a wine shelf. So I think I looked a little bit into, I mean, wine's different, but I know with the kind of a premiumization of like beer that they're kind of going more towards kind of that kind of wine where you got the terroir and the kind of all these different like things going on. But on the main shelves, of craft beer, it's there's so many different labels, so many different styles, so that's the only thing, the closest comparison would be like maybe like wine. But it's become, with the kind of rise of like popularity in craft beer, this kind of become like a lifestyle brand kind of thing. If you think about somebody that walks into a party, it's got like a 4-pack or a 6-pack in their hand. That's kind of like this, it's almost a style, it's almost a lifestyle. It could be like sneakers, right? Like if you walk into a party and you got those new Jordans or whatever. I'm not a sneaker guy. I'm not a sneaker guy. So that's like, probably, yeah. But you walk in with
those are shoes.
New, yeah, they're shoes. You like walk into a party with the new Jordans and somebody looks and you're like, oh, that person has that style, or that like they're cool, right? So if you walk in and you've got like some new like Allagash like 4-pack, they're like, oh damn, that dude knows what's up,
Right.
So there's some lifestyle element to that. So I'm really interested in learning more about those kind of like lifestyle brands. And I think also talking like on the marketing side of things, and Allagash was a great example actually to talk about in the regards to branding and marketing and their like Instagram. You know, like they do a great job at really encapsulating like the lifestyle of like the outdoors and just like what it's like to be out at their brewery and so that in that sense, I think they're doing a great job. I think it's really trying to create an experience, trying to create something that people can recognize and like want to be a part of. Yeah.
Wonderful.
They had Allagash just recently. I saw they posted like a picture of the foliage, and I mean Allagash is a brewery, and here they are talking about how beautiful the leaves are, and it helps me identify with them more than just they make my beer, but I also like camping.
Right.
I love your story about like seeing someone at a party that's wearing Jordans and knowing, all right, I can't talk to them about sneakers, but if they're holding the new 4-pack of Allagash, it helps me kind of a lifestyle brand
For sure.
One of the things I was really excited to talk to you about kind of comes from my own, like early on in my beer profession. I was at retail sales, and people would like the kind of the simplified version of the story is people would come in looking for a fat tire. And then some people would also say like, what do you have from New Belgium?
Right.
And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you was like, how is it important that breweries differentiate themselves from their beer? Or is it something they do intentionally? Like now, if you look at New Belgium, most people probably think of them as the Voodoo Ranger people. Mm-hmm. Is that a clever marketing move, or is that something that you think about?
I guess to this point, I haven't worked with maybe like that kind of caliber of brewery. The doors are open. I'm welcome to it.
That's right. Hit them up.
But I haven't worked, with like the New Belgiums or Sierra Nevadas or, the one Firestone Walker 805 is another good example that comes to mind.
Yes.
So I will say that first and foremost, I think that you need to, especially for a newer brewery, it's so easy. Well, a new brewery comes out, it's going to get hyped up, and with the kind of aesthetic and like style of doing like taproom releases where like one package, I think like Harrison, you mentioned like the Marlboro label that you saw that, you got one that looks like that. You got one that looks like a cartoon. You got one that looks like, and this is all from the same brewery. And if you're a new brewery that's getting hyped up, you're going to sell a lot of beer because you're new. But when that kind of starts tapering off, do people still remember you for your brewery name, for your brewery brand, or do they, So I think first and foremost, I think it's really important to develop the brand of your brewery, and to have that be recognizable on the label. I think, and that's not to say that you can't leave room for creative artwork and to have fun releases and fun names and that kind of stuff like that. But I think it's really important that you have your brewery prominent on that label. I think that there's a good argument that you should have well-designed and branded maybe like core packaging. So your everyday beers that you're going to be releasing.
Right.
And I think nowadays too, because retail is so sought after because of the whole coronavirus situation.
Right.
Yeah. So it's competitive. I think some retailers I think are wanting to see a consistent flow of like core beers. Depending on where your market is, other markets are totally used to having just a bunch of one-offs, and they have a dedicated section on the store that's all one-offs, and so that's a different story. But so for your brewery's brand, I think it's great to have a great core package, like look and feel, and that can be used to then build what your one-offs look like or what your seasonals look like. And then they can like relate to each other. So you can look at a one-off and be like, oh, that's still, XYZ brewery. I can tell by the look, but it's just different, And it takes time. I think if you ask any of these breweries like about 805 or Fat Tire or Voodoo Ranger, I don't think most of those started off as like, let's give this its own dedicated brand.
Right.
They evolved and grew that way.
Yeah.
I knew I interviewed Andrew Emerton from New Belgium. He's a specialty brand manager for them, and it seemed to some degree that there were some challenges that they were known as the Fat Tire Brewery. Right. It's great that was iconic, but then at certain times when you want to break off and you want to release other beers and have them become equally notable, if you're known as just the Fat Tire Brewery, then it's like you got to break out of that. So I think it has some downfalls. Running two brands is like, that's also challenging. You got to do 2 social media accounts. You got to do, all this marketing for 2 different brands. It's great. I'm sure it's no doubt great to have that like iconic winner that's just like raking in the money so you can do all these other fun experiments over here. But, I think it's just something you'll grow into. I don't think it's a good idea to try to launch that. I think when you do launch a beer, this I think ties to this, is that I think you should think of it as a kind of a campaign or kind of a brand of its own. You can release a label, say it's like a fruited wheat beer or something, and it's in the summer. Well, you're going to market that to like a certain feel, like summer,
right.
Rivers, lakes, summer, you're going to market that a kind of certain way. But if you're going to be marketing like a wild, like mixed fermentation saison in a bottle, you're going to be speaking about it in a different way, and it's going to have its own kind of thing. And so you can kind of create like branding campaigns around each label, right? It's like each one of it's its own brand. So you can create its own look and feel. You can create its own kind of persona about how you talk about it, like what kind of language you use. And so you can treat each one, I think it's a good idea to treat each one kind of its own little brand and talk about it and market it in its own way.
Yeah, that's great.
I appreciate you answering that question, because I think it's probably something that there isn't really an easy answer for.
Right.
But I think you gave some great context.
Thank you.
As to like what are the pros and cons of being the Fat Tire Brewery?
Yeah.
And when you said managing more than one social media, right. I manage my own personal social media sometimes, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah. I often fail at that. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, it's no longer summer anymore. I'll just scroll past that. Mm-hmm. I know Harrison had a pretty awesome kind of closing question ready for you, Harrison.
Yeah. It was kind of just like a fun one. Speaking of all this, and really kind of just to your point just now of treating, you could treat each beer release as its own brand and market it as such. Are there any off the top of your head, like crazy beer labels or really effective or memorable kind of campaigns that you think of, whether it's for a brewery or a new beer release or, whatever that you're thinking about it now, so clearly it made an impact on you? Is anything like that kind of like jump out right away, where even if it wasn't crazy, just like you said, it might just be Allagash taking a picture of trees in the fall, and you're like, this is no longer just a brewery. Now I feel like it's a bit of an experience, bit of a lifestyle brand. Yeah. Anything like that you can think of or want to share?
There's so many, and I guess part of the challenge is I have a good circle of friends that all do branding for breweries as well, and I see so much of their work. I've got a good buddy. His name's Alex, who works for the Brewery and Offshoot. And he's shown me some cool stuff they've been doing with like Offshoot with like some of their campaigns, where they create a label and then they also have a bunch of different Instagram images that match the label art, and then like campaigns in regards to like the merchandise that will go with it too. So that they're doing some great stuff. I think maybe another one that might be bigger that comes to mind would be, I saw I think it was maybe like the marketing manager from Sierra Nevada that was doing a presentation at I think it was California Craft Summit conference, and they were talking about finding their kind of way when it came to marketing and branding, and it took them this was just recently that they discovered that like they need to like market this as like an outdoors beer,
right,
and they were like, why in the hell have we not figured this out? We've been doing business for 25 years, right. And they were doing. Before they were doing billboards, they were doing magazine ads, they were doing like traditional advertising that most breweries don't do. Granted, it's Sierra Nevada, but they finally got to the point where they're like, we need to be marketing this to showing the beer on a kayak in a lake. They need to be showing this beer in somebody's backpack hiking along a trail. It's like because. I think they asked their customers, and I think they finally realized that like when somebody thinks of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, they think of the mountains, they think of hiking, they think of camping. So as just an example, I think like in regards to this kind of like campaigns, I think that was a good case study of like what do your customers think of about your beer, and then trying to like figure that out. But they finally found out what resonated, and I was like, okay, boom, here's now everything you see from them now is like kind of like this is like the outdoor beer that you should take camping with you or something.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And they're one of my favorite breweries, so I follow all their stuff. And you're right, that's a great point though of even now, like I think of them as an outdoor brand, but like, I don't know when I started thinking about that. It's only probably been a couple of years since I figured it out. But in my head, now that I'm realizing that, like, I just have always thought of them that way. But at some point, they weren't. They were just kind of like Sierra Nevada and we're the Pale Ale. But they figured it out. And now looking back, all I see in recent memory is like, kayaks and camping, and I'm on the beach. Or they did a great campaign where it was like a Instagram kind of hashtag, whatever it was, and do you take a picture of their beer somewhere cool, and the top 3 people want a backpack or whatever. But it was like, thousands of entries and a lot of great engagement. It was really cool to follow along with it and see like where people were taking this beer. And you're right, like now when I think about going camping or going to the beach or whatever, it's like, well, obviously I got to get a Sierra Nevada if I'm going to do this. Yeah. And it's like that thought feels natural in my head, like I came up with it. But I didn't. I'm just like thinking about how many times I've seen on their social media, like someone in the woods with a beer, that I think it's just like an idea I think I'm having, but it's not. It worked. It worked perfectly. Yeah. I want one right now. Yeah, it's worked really well.
I mean, and I'll say too, it can be really challenging because you're constantly trying to feed the beasts. You're putting out a new beer like once or twice a month. And so they could be challenging in regards to being able to dedicate that kind of efforts, money, time to creating a campaign around each one. But I guess I can kind of go back to the idea of having those like iconic like 805 or Fat Tire. It's like over time, like maybe you develop a flagship or a core, or something. Regardless, I think it's worthwhile to try to like create some sort of like campaign that goes beyond just the label, that goes to different images for Instagram and Facebook and different merchandise items that could like there's been some another one actually that funny that comes to mind is like I think Alvarado Street in California, and they do just super like they created like this like 80s style video where they're all wearing like hip sacks, and like neon colors, and like they're on jet skis, like pounding like 12-ounce beers. And, and there's some fun stuff that they do where like you can, with like each 4-pack, you get like a fanny pack or something, just stuff like that. I think there was one that came out. I had this idea, and I think somebody did it where they designed a label to where it was the old school 3D, and it came with the red and blue glasses on a 4-pack. Yeah,
there we go.
So try to do fun stuff like that. I think the idea it's hard to grab people's attention these days, and I think anything like that is just going above and beyond your typical label.
Yeah. Do you think, a quick follow-up to that, do you think that like doing things like that, so for like a single brand or a single campaign, like obviously the goal is to not just sell that beer and a lot of that beer, but like kind of endear yourself to gather more fans, basically, like make yourself cool, but also do you think that it's pretty effective. Like maybe it's one beer a year is that 3D glasses on the 4-pack with the comic strip that's part of the packaging. But like that's what gets that person to like the 11 months left of the year keep coming back to your brand, because it's like, oh, the brewery that did that goofy thing once, I like them. Like that's kind of the goal, right? To get someone to like have in your head, like I have with the Woods in Sierra Nevada, like I like these guys. I like these guys. Like if that's your first thought, I think that's you've kind of won.
Yeah.
But how do you get there, right? Like
right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think there's like a general like rule that I think that's like once somebody sees your like logo or brand or whatever like 7 times, then it's something that might actually stick, right?
Yes.
So I think the idea, and this I think what goes with branding in general, is just consistency. It's it's damn hard. You think about like you see follow us on Facebook, and it's some like it's like a mortuary or a morgue or something, right? It's like, I'm not going to follow you on Facebook. You're freaking morgue. What are you talking about?
But we have specials every Thursday.
Yeah, that's right. It's discount. Yeah, discount Tuesday. But so it's hard to get people to follow you on Facebook or Instagram. Right. But with that said, if somebody has, you put out a really fun label and it's got 3D glasses, and somebody's like, whoa, that's really cool. They see you in the store again, and you've got something else that also, like, it doesn't have to maybe is equal as, like creative and crazy, but if it has a really good label and it's, it's something they see. Once somebody like has experience with your brand, they're much more likely to buy it again. If I know for me personally, sometimes I will just go to a brand I know on the shelf just to avoid spending, $15-$16 on like a 4-pack that I might take home and not love. If I see a brewery that I know and I love and they've got a beer maybe I haven't tried, well then I'll just go for that. And that's, I think for me, that's how I work when I look at a shelf. So when somebody experiences your brand, they're much more likely to come back to it. I think that's one of the things about having great branding and having consistent packaging is that once somebody becomes familiar with your brand, it makes it that much easier for you to put out new releases, because they see that, they look on the shelf like, oh, that's XYZ brewery. And oh, what do you know? Like there's a new label. I haven't seen that one. I've tried them. I like them. They had this really fun one and they had 3D glasses. Yeah, I'll try that new one. It just makes it that much easier. And this is the consistency. So I think having equal quality in regards to your label design consistently, so that once they see it, they know who you are, and it represents the quality of your beer. The quality of your design, the quality of your branding has a direct correlation to how like people perceive the quality of the liquid inside. So I think that makes a big difference there. So I think really those all play factors. I think if you can grab somebody's attention with that fun thing, but then you can kind of just keep coming with consistency and like people will start to get to know you, and then that will make a connection there. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that point. And you tell it so well. It takes me right back to my last trip down the beer aisle, where you see, like, I'm a huge fan of Burial here in North Carolina. They have a pretty regular artist that does all their labels for them. I've bought a couple of prints because I think he's a talented artist, and they have one label on their inner tube lager. Right. That stands. It doesn't look like a Burial beer, and every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's a neat looking label. Who makes this? And I have to like grab the can and remind myself that's a Burial beer. Yeah. And I could see that going bad the other way as well, right? Like if I'm looking for another beer from a brand that's already earned my trust, and they release a new one-off beer and it doesn't match their brand, then I might be more likely to not even notice it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another point I was going to mention is that, so there's a couple ways you can look at it. There's, kind of talking about more like just one-offs that you're going to do like, you're just going to do like a palette of, and then you're going to be done with, or, there's the ones that you're going to try to have like maybe on the shelves more regularly. So you might have something that's more designed as like a core kind of look and feel that's like consistent. it's totally okay to have those crazy one-offs, that don't match anything you've got. If you're planning on selling them out of that tap room and whatever, like that's okay. That's been working for a lot of breweries. But just be aware. I feel like that I've noticed a lot of breweries that go all over the place. Like they hire one designer to do this label, they hire another designer to do this label, they hire an artist to do this label, and like maybe the artist doesn't know design, so they make a cool looking piece of art, but they don't make a label that's designed well. That's all good and everything if you have a strategy behind it, if you are putting it together in a cohesive way. But if it's all just all over the place, hodgepodge, then that makes your brand that much weaker. It just makes it harder to remember you when you see it on the shelf.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
We've all been there. But while we're not in the beer shelf, before we go out to make our next purchase, I want to remind everyone that they're welcome to, and please do check the show notes for this episode. Check out the link to Branding Brews, which is Ryan's podcast. If you want to learn more about marketing, please check him out. Send us any feedback you have about the interview. Otherwise, before we get to wrapping up the show, Ryan, any parting words? If not, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, no, this has been really fun. I know you guys, being in Untappd, you've seen so much in regards to labels and the marketing in the beer industry. So it's just an honor to be on with you guys. I appreciate it. No, I mean just you can check me out at craftbrewcreative.com. That's where my business lies. You can check out my portfolio and other stuff I do, there. And yeah, if anyone honestly has any questions, if you want to pick my brain, reach out. It's Ryan at craftbrewcreative.com. I'm always happy to connect with people and talk with people, just in whatever way, it's all good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks again. Yeah, this was awesome, Ryan. We had a blast, and now I'm gonna go find some Sierra Nevada and a cave to drink it in, or whatever, and
on the top of a mountain,
right? And leave us all with that image of me Perfect. Cold on a mountain but happy.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, awesome. That was so much fun, talking to Ryan about that, hearing his experience being on the front lines of this stuff. And just getting to share some stories with him and making me think about Sierra Nevada more than I already do, which I didn't know what happened tonight, but here we are, and that's not too surprising. But that was great.
It's been an awesome, I remember when we first were we should try and come up with a series to just cover the very basics of beer. I know sometimes we went maybe a little bit beyond the very basics, especially in your fermentation science episode.
Right, I know. I think I had, again, we've had a couple of beverages at that point. It's kind of like Freewheel and Harrison kicking back in the bar stool and just no rules, no time. Let's just get into it. So I appreciate you guys sticking with us. Hopefully it made sense and was enjoyable. But yeah, it was a thing we wanted to do for a long time, and we did it. So I'm happy and sad at the same time. With all good things, though, they must end, and we're on to the next thing, right?
If there's still questions unanswered, things
True.
You really want to get into about beer, Harrison is not only a fabulous guitarist, but a pretty damn good scientist. Hit us up on Twitter at That Beer Podcast and ask away. We'd love to answer those questions or try.
Yeah, for sure. And other than that, tune in next week for some beers from across the pond. We're drinking 2 different beers from Siren Brewing.
Nice.
That'll be awesome. I've never had anything from them, so that's going to be really cool.
Otherwise, this episode and all of our episodes are brought to you by Untappd and the Untappd merchandise store. If you're checking it out, you'll go to store.untappd.com. When you get there, though, make sure you use the coupon code podcast. That's going to give you 20% off, and it's going to let them know you listen to the show, which certainly is pretty cool. Otherwise, show notes for this and all of our shows are available at podcast.untappd.com. If you have any questions or feedback or questions about Beer 201, connect with us on Untappd, Twitter, Facebook. Connect with Untappd directly. Let them know you're asking about drinking socially, or join our Facebook group at facebook.com/drinkingsocially.
Yeah, and we will see you guys next week.
Cheers.
Cheers!
There we go.
Bullseye.